Yes. Well, and I
Mhm.
think that's one of the, what was I gonna say? There was something that had come up in my brain. I was gonna share it. I don't remember now. Oh well. So yeah,
Right.
I'm just really wanting to bring that. Oh, positive intelligence. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
No.
Positive intelligence is this program. It's so fantastic, and I took that program about a year and a half ago, and I'm getting certified as a positive intelligence coach, and that has been huge because it really just it talks about that anger really comes from, well, all of the negative emotions really come from the saboteurs, the saboteur thinking patterns, which are, of course, are the cognitive distortions, in counselor language. And so just the way that he has the mindfulness, and there's an app and everything, that's been really, really helpful too, to bring that. And it's one of the sage powers is empathy, which of course is one of the things that was talked about in this program as well, and that emotional intelligence. So yeah, it
Yeah.
really combined together to just click, I think.
Well, it really adds to the changing the brain idea, because I think that with everything they found out about the brain and neuroplasticity and developing the prefrontal cortex, and I think that any positive intelligence, the cognitive behavioral strategies, all of that just kind of, it changes the brain. I mean, even behavior changes the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so as people can think more positively, and that's why we came up with what's good about anger.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, just a negative attitude about anger, I think
Creates more.
Yeah, it creates more anger. It creates shame. It
Yes,
creates,
it does. Yeah.
guilt, shame, so many things that hinder people from, acting appropriately, or, and or building their emotional intelligence. The EQ, I think, is really important. And I think with coaching, I've had over 100 hours of coaching until I found out that I didn't finish the program, because I found out that I would be held to the standard of my license as a licensed clinical professional counselor, no matter what I did. And you could take it off the wall, but I'd still be held to that standard and be liable. And so it didn't make sense for me to say I was a coach and a counselor. I use coaching techniques. So I really like the coaching techniques because it's goal oriented.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And I think, and it's very positive. I think that it could be, in what I experienced, and I'm just sharing this as from one coach to another, or a coach student anyway. From my experience, it was a little pushy in my training. They really pushed you, and it wasn't, and that I didn't like, because I don't like, I want people to have their own self-empowerment, their own control, make their own choices.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be bad choices, but maybe they'll learn from it,
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they are unique. They have dignity, and it's up to them to make their, and I think that that's what the program is about. What's good about anger, and how can you make choices about how you're going to manage it or express it?
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell somebody, hey, you've got to do this. If I do that,
nobody's listening.
What?
Nobody's listening. When you start out that way, nobody's listening.
They're going to go back to their old patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Well,
and one of the One of the things I heard about anger is that it's an emotion that tells you that somebody may have crossed your boundaries. And
Right.
so in that sense, it's beautiful. Anger is beautiful because it tells you that there's something that you didn't like about a situation. And when you can listen, and you can take those emotions, whatever they are, but especially anger, when you can take that and you can say, okay, well, what is this telling me about this situation I'm going through, and how can I use that knowledge to feel better about it, whether it's, communicate to fix the relationship or make the relationship better or set the boundary. That's that. So that I always thought that was, when I heard that, I thought that was pretty interesting, how to be able to shift that and use, anger as a way to know that this is a time to put a boundary down. This is a time that communication needs to happen about, what happened there. Not that it's everyone else's fault all the time. Sometimes our boundaries need to be there because of our own traumas, right? But at least that communication can happen, and that can open the door to discussing what that means and healing. I mean, that's another thing about trauma too, is that healing, respecting our own boundaries and limits, while also acknowledging, like, I don't want to continue to have this boundary that doesn't feel fair or doesn't feel like, it's something that I want to continue. And so I can choose to heal and move through that and be able to change that for myself. So, yeah.
Exactly. And that means that the person needs to be out of the amygdala part of the brain, that emotional center of the brain, and get into that prefrontal cortex. But a lot of people get that amygdala hijacked, and so they can't think. And so that's why I believe the relaxation and the breathing techniques are so critical to help people calm themselves down and increase the calming hormones so that they can decrease that adrenaline. I think that people, when they understand what's going on with the brain, a lot of times just the education, the education is getting their prefrontal cortex going and expanding it, and that's what we want. And so I think that the key, what I like about what you were saying is that you begin asking questions. What's going on? What's happening here? I feel that tightness or tenseness somewhere in my body. I don't like what's going on, so rather than shouting, yelling, getting out of control, walking out the door, and slamming it, take some of the diaphragmatic deep breaths and, calm myself down, and start asking questions, okay, so what's happening? What's going on? What don't I like? And here's this is from my own life. I was in the grocery store and waiting for my turn at the deli counter, and I didn't have a ticket, but there was nobody around, so I didn't grab a ticket. And the gal said, "So who's next?" I said, "I guess I am." So some guy came up to me all of a sudden, and he was like maybe a foot away from me, and he said, "I was here first. Didn't you see me?" I mean, this wasn't a racial thing. This was, this is a Caucasian guy, and he was like, real forceful and intimidating. That was scary. And so, but anyway, so I just bring out my little, little phrases. "Oh, I didn't see you, sir. Go right ahead." But I'm, this isn't a life or death thing. I don't care. Go ahead. I didn't say that, but so anyway, so he took his turn, then I took my turn. Then I start pushing my little cart around the Jewel, and I'm the type of person that, because I'm partly an introvert, I start thinking about things. Then after it happens, okay. So I start thinking, who did that guy think he was? Number one.
So then the next time you see him in the grocery store, then you're giving him a dirty look like, you jerk.
Yeah. And yeah, who did he think he was? How dare he? And then if I see him, of course, I'm realizing what I'm saying in my head. Now, a lot of people don't know what they're saying in their head. They don't know. They don't, unless, and that's why I think that it's so important for them to do the survey, to log their thinking in the very first part of the book, to be able to gain that self-awareness, which is, of course, first level of emotional intelligence, but that's all part of addictions counseling,
Mhm.
self-awareness, getting out of self-denial, getting out of denial. And so being able to hear myself. So then, and I'm hearing myself and I'm going, wait a minute. And I don't know if I prayed. I can't remember, but wait a minute, and I go, wait a minute. If you see him, you don't want to talk to him, it's not, where is that going to go? I mean, he's a stranger, number one.
Mhm.
It's not like a personal relationship where I need to resolve it. He was a person being rude to me. And so, what are the consequences going to be? Asking myself other questions. And then I go, and maybe he was having a bad day.
Mhm.
Now, that's a really, really good phrase.
Yeah.
Because that calmed me down. And that made me, and that put me in his shoes. I'm beginning to,
Empathy.
I'm showing empathy, or, to a stranger. And so by the time I leave the store, I let it go, but it's a great story. And I mean, I can tell that to anybody. I can tell that to my clients. And it's normal. And I guess that's a part of it. It's normal, but I'm aware of my thinking. I'm aware of what my actions, what the consequences might be. And then and then I start putting myself in his shoes, and, I can let it go.
Yep.
I think empathy is important in forgiveness. I think they're tied together. Boy, forgiveness
Absolutely.
is it?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think so. I mean, because if we're to forgive someone, we have to somewhat understand that they weren't trying to intentionally hurt us, and that there was some level of their own saboteurs, their own traumas, their own bad day, their own story that come out in their behavior. And I think we can all relate to just having bad days, right? And saying things and being more rude than we intend to because we just had a bad day. So I think we can all relate to that. And so, yeah, I think it definitely has a part to do with forgiveness and letting things go, right? Even without an apology, because a lot of times you don't get the apology.
Yeah. And I mean, that's, that is a big part of life. And people don't know how to apologize anymore. It is something hard about it. Well, I think that there's a couple things about anger that are real interesting. Number one, it's a moral emotion. I feel right about something, and I like feeling right. I don't want to feel like, I'm wrong about something. With my husband, I gotta, it's going to be, there's going to be fights just because, or disagreements just because both of us are feeling right about something. But what's more important? The relationship. The relationship is more important. And obviously, if someone's asking you to do something that's against your morals, no, you don't go there. But anyway, and I think the other part is the control that anger helps us to feel. I feel like I'm in control. So if I'm angry and if I hold on to anger, now that happened in my household. I didn't realize my mother was a domestic violence victim. Now my father was abusive.
Mhm.
But you know, I didn't know what was going on with them. So until later on in life. So so she would give us the cold shoulder when she was angry.
Mhm.
And that emotional, it was emotionally abusive, but it's kind of like she couldn't help it. Because
Mhm.
if she would have shown that she was upset about something, that could trigger my father.
Mhm.
So who knows what would have happened. But anyway, so that I think that that anger made her feel like she had some control. But it's just a feeling that we don't want to give up. I like feeling angry. You know, I can
Mhm.
go around, I feel like I'm in control. I'm in control of my situation, control of others. But you know, how's that working for you, right?
Right, exactly, exactly. Well, and I think that's one of the, one of the things that the saboteurs, in that saboteur language, controller, where the controller personality or the controller type saboteur that comes up, it's intended to control things because we're afraid of being out of control. We're afraid that we won't be able to control ourselves or control our situations and control what's happening. And
Mhm.
so, anger, like you're saying, anger allows us to gain control. It allows us to gain control over others or gain control over the situation. It allows us to express, um, albeit in a way that isn't always beneficial, and has
Mhm.
its cons. It allows us to express that here's my boundary, here's what I don't do that anymore, kind of thing. And so yeah, I agree, it does make it feel like it's accomplishing something, but it has its cons too, and it has its consequences. And so thinking, and I don't think very many people recognize that. I know in my own experience with anger and having irritability, I guess that's what it always felt like to me, was just being irritable, which is similar. I never really understood that it was pushing people away. Like, I thought it was being honest, right? Like it felt
Mhm.
like it was just honesty about how I'm feeling and open with that. But it didn't click that it was creating space, and it was creating resentment, and it was creating a gap in the relationship, because other people are feeling emotions at the same time, and it shuts them down. They're not able to express their own feelings. And so after having some realization with that, then it clicked that of course it's creating distance, of course it's damaging relationships. But I just didn't know that. I didn't know. And so to have that, I think that's where empathy comes into play too, of like, how are people receiving that? How are people shut down? Their own emotions have to be shut down because they're in survival mode, because somebody's angry, right? Because somebody
Yeah.
is creating a situation where they also can't express themselves. And so yeah, I think it's really insightful to be able to kind of get out of your own emotion and be able to see and have that empathy of how someone else is receiving you as well in various situations. And so
Mhm.
yeah, that was really helpful too, to have that.
Yeah, and so I think, well, you touched on a couple things. That early awareness of that irritability is really important, and dealing with it at that level,
Hmm.
because irritability and annoyance, that's okay. I mean, I'm going to get irritable. I'm going to get annoyed when a guy is yelling at me, or you know, anybody's yelling at me, or somebody cuts
Hmm.
me off on the road or something like that. But am I going to get out of control? Am I
Right.
going to, you know, scream, yell, holler, try and uh, um, follow that car and get revenge or something like that?
Right.
That's not going to work, and it's scary, especially in Chicagoland area here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
people, a
absolutely.
lot of shootings on the highway. So
Oh my
anyway,
goodness.
yeah, and so so that part, so that's what I really like too, is that helping people to see it is okay to be irritable. Hanging on to the irritability is gonna fester and be a problem, cause a rift in relationships unless you know, tackle whatever's going on. That's why I like, you know, here you can learn to problem solve. So many people, they're growing up in families, excuse me, you know, and some of our people, you know, in some of the poorer neighborhoods, and it's, you know, well, anybody, it doesn't matter. I mean, look at Alex Murdaugh. I mean, look at some of these, you know, I mean, that's a scary situation there, but killed his, you know, wife and son. But talk about anger, violence, and that's just the modus operandi that people go to. You know, the violence, the aggression, you know, rather than how can we problem solve? How can we work this out? But that takes prefrontal cortex work, you know, that takes learning communication. How can we be assertive, like you were talking about? Set boundaries is really important, because I think about a lot of people who are angry feel victimized. And so if they know that they can set boundaries, and that takes, you know, communication, although your domestic violence victims don't feel like they can set boundaries. They, you know, it's they're in scary situations, so they can't speak up like my mother. And so but that all is so important. And but when people understand it's okay to be irritable and annoyed, that's normal, and that's an indicator that I'm upset about something and I have a right to be angry. You know, there's some maybe injustice or something like that going on. I should be angry. And so, but how can I proceed? And I had a situation, he wasn't a client, he was a mover. He was moving our office furniture from one building to the next. The buildings were right next to each other. We were going up on the elevator together, and he had some of our furniture. And this mover said to me, I see that you write about anger and you counsel. He said, we're all angry. My boss is very angry. So I'm going, what can I teach this guy in 30 seconds?
Here's my card. Get the whole business, get the whole everybody in a training.
So anyway, I just taught him the diaphragmatic breathing, because he can't like leave the furniture in the elevator in the hall and just walk away because he's mad at his boss, who's swearing at him throughout the day, which is typical. And so anyway, if he can do the diaphragmatic breathing, then he can maybe get into the prefrontal cortex and think about what it is that he's upset about, and maybe how he can deal with the situation later on. So, but so many people, and I'm sure that you deal with this in addictions. I mean, there talk about sabotage. I mean, the drug abuse, the alcohol abuse sabotages any work in the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I definitely think that it influences people's ability to think straight. But I also believe that, you know, there's certainly the ability for people to be able to problem solve even if they're high. You know, I don't think that it's impossible for people to gain skills even if they're still using. And I think you know, that's my opinion, but and I know that that's probably not going to be everybody's opinion. It definitely challenges it. It makes it more difficult, you know, than if somebody wasn't using. But I think too, you know, that validation. I think that's the key for anger, because I think anybody that is yelling, they just don't feel heard, right? That's why they're yelling, because
Right.
they don't feel
Right.
heard, so the volume is more. And as soon as you validate someone's anger, you validate their feelings, then immediately it brings down the volume of their anger and the volume of their voice, because then they feel like, okay, I'm understood. They hear me,
Right.
they hear what I'm saying, and validation, like you're saying, validation takes understanding why someone's angry. Understanding, like, even if you don't have an answer, even if you don't have a solution, but sometimes there's not even a solution. Sometimes it just saying, I hear that you're angry, I hear that you're upset about this situation, just that can shift the whole entire conversation. But it does take that ability to think about that instead of being hijacked, because I think that's the case with a lot of us. If we've been in violent situations, if we've witnessed domestic violence, our first response is not to be understanding, right? And have that empathy. Our first response is, oh, shoot, I'm in danger. And so
Right.
that's how, like, those arguments just escalate sometimes, because both people are hijacked and they're just arguing against their controller and anger saboteur, and so being able to, and I feel like this is, victim of domestic violence, they master this, right? They master the ability to de-escalate situations sometimes because they've had to for survival.
Right.
But, in the case of, just general life and people that are angry themselves or dealing with other people that are angry, that validation does shift that and allow people to be able to, calm down. And that's what I use, in with my clients. I get a lot of clients that are mad because they don't even want to be at my eval. They don't even want to be
Yeah.
seeing me because courts are forcing them. And
Mhm.
that's, that validation of, I understand that you feel like this isn't necessary, and that just brings the tone down completely. And just thinking about doing anger management classes, where it might be the same thing, where somebody's mad that they even have to be there. That's like my go-to is that validation and just expressing that understanding, like, you have a feeling for a reason. It feels like, I can hear that it feels like it's unfair, or,
Right.
just even though I don't agree, or I don't necessarily, can understand, or feel the same way, it doesn't matter. Validating doesn't mean that I have to agree with it. Validating just means that I'm hearing how you're feeling. And
Right.
so yeah, that's my go-to every
Right.
time.
Right. I think that is key. And of course, it's key and for us as counselors to to really assist people and walk them through, and it helps us to understand, even though we might disagree or we might not, feel like we can identify, like you said, it does help us to understand, oh, here's a different person, they're on a different path, they've had a different life,
Mhm.
and they have a different situation, and this is how they're handling it, though it might be mishandling it. I had a situation where one gal um, came to our group, and she said that she was court ordered to come. Well, she's a professional office manager. This was many years ago, and she said, I don't have an anger management problem, but I'm here and I have to do this. And so she explained the situation. She said she had somebody came into her office and and started raising their voice at her. So she took them by the arm and walked them out of the office. Well, that's assault and battery, unfortunately. And so unfortunately, she just wasn't prepared
Mhm.
she wasn't prepared to de-escalate, prepared to show some empathy, prepared to validate, like you're talking about. You know, I understand that you're having a problem, a situation with us, and I really like to hear more about it. But I really, yeah, I'd like to ask you to lower your voice so that we can discuss it,
Mhm.
and maybe I can help you solve the problem. So she didn't do that. She just,
Yep.
you know, she was in the fight flight. She was in the, you know, I'm scared, you know, but I'm going to get this person out of here.
Yep.
Well, you know, and she'd been doing it 20 years. She'd been a professional office manager. Apparently didn't have a situation like that.
Well, and I think that just
Mhm.
comes back to tolerance, our own ability to tolerate situations and other people's emotions that they might be throwing at us.
Yeah.
I'm sure that if it was a different day, if she had just got done with a massage the day before, I'm sure that maybe she would have been able to tap into some of those ways that I'm sure she's had customers come in and, have be angry or upset, and that she
Yeah.
was able to deal with it in a different way. And and
Yeah.
and I think, that ability for us to um adjust and adapt to what's going on and be flexible to what's going on, without those hijacks, without being hijacked, is really important. And that's resilience, coming back
Yeah.
to being resilient about what's going on and how to adjust in a situation, and adjust in the changes. That's really important too, and to be able to
Mhm.
teach someone that, in an anger management setting, I think is definitely beneficial, because then they're gaining skills for a lot of other things. I mean, just like
Right.
any mental health, you get a skill and it's not just in one situation. It helps
Yeah.
in various situations. So
Exactly, exactly. And had she been prepared, had she had some skills, and most likely, like you said, she did have coping skills, but for some reason was not able to uh, put them into place in that situation. And maybe this person was more threatening
mhm,
than someone else, and more accusational or something like that. But in any case, learning the skills and then adapting. And I think a lot of people, that's the other thing that I look for when I have clients come in is, so how have you handled maybe less frustrating situations than this in the past? And maybe it's been something that you could work through. Maybe it was, maybe you were able to let it go when you found out the other person was stressed out
mhm,
or something like that. Um, and so I think that is um, exploring that, and that's why I really like the logs, having them log what's going on, because maybe one week they'll be able to handle a situation, the next week they can't handle a situation.
mhm,
And maybe one situation's more severe than the other, but I think everybody has some skills. And I like what you said about even if people are high, they can probably still learn skills. Well, I kind of feel that way about people with mental health issues,
mhm,
that they most likely can learn skills that are going to help them, even though they have had, maybe they have PTSD, or maybe they have ADHD, or maybe they have um, depression or anxiety that's exacerbating the situation. Maybe they're bipolar. How can they calm themselves down so then they can move
mhm,
forward and use some of the coping skills that they have used in the past? And
mhm,
so I really do like to build on that because it builds their confidence too.
mhm. Absolutely. Well, and I think, that c- brings away the shame, right? Because when we start focusing on, what are the skills that you already have, and let's build on that, then it's taking away the shame of not having skills. It's
Right.
really taking away that feeling of helplessness or inability, or lack of confidence in themselves. They can see that there are some, and I think that that's one of the ways that can really impact anger and distress tolerance in of itself, is like we're saying, thinking of the positive and looking at the positive, and trying to stay positive. Because if we're looking at what are the skills I can bring to this situation,
Mhm.
what are the ways that I can communicate that I've already communicated before, and I know how to do that, then I can feel better about the situation. And so
Mhm.
just teaching people to look at their value, and teaching people to look at what are the things that you're already doing well. And I bring that into my addiction counseling a lot, because there's so many people that are just beating themselves up for a relapse or a slip, and yet they just spent 2 months being sober, and yet they're just beating themselves up. And of course, family and society definitely has the impact on that as well, of, oh, you messed up again. But just really looking at, well, you got through 2 months somehow, and so how did that happen? What were you doing that was working?
Mhm.
And it's amazing how quick that can shift people's mind, and shift people's emotions in the moment. So I think that's the same thing with, anger and being able to handle situations like that too.
Yeah, that's the affirmation from Orr's technique, right? Yeah,
Yep,
yeah, motivational interviewing. I think the motivational interviewing and coaching are kind of similar, don't you?
I
But
do.
motivational interviewing, because it does give you steps, even though they can overlap and sometimes you're mixing it up. But I really do like that part.
Mhm.
And feel like that is so helpful for people with anger issues, because people who feel angry get stuck
Yep,
and don't feel like they can move forward.
yep.
And boy, your affirmation is really that's what we like to do.
Mhm.
That's I think so helpful, because people with anger issues get stuck. And I think the other part that I wanted to talk emphasize was the self-empowerment idea.
Yeah.
Rather than because anger makes me feel like I have control over a situation, it takes me out of feeling victimized. But instead, I have control over somebody in a situation. It's having control over myself. So self empowerment is really important,
Mhm.
and that is what can move me forward. I can't control that other person or what they do. I can make a request, but I'm in control of myself. Like you said, I can assert myself. I can set some boundaries. Um, if needed, I can walk away, uh, respectfully.
Mhm.
You know what? I need more time to think about this. I'll get back to you.
Yep.
Simple,
Yeah.
simple little, I think, phrases are really helpful.
Yeah. Well, and that self-empowerment is such a beautiful concept, to be able to bring, and it reminds me of harm reduction with addictions. It's easy for my brain, as we're talking, it's easy for me to see that I'm already using all of these things with, different perspectives that I use with addiction. But the harm reduction is really like, you have the power and choice to continue using. It doesn't mean that you don't deserve help in some way, right? And that it harm reduction is giving that help, even if somebody doesn't want to quit using, even if somebody is going to choose to use as soon as they leave. That we can still provide them help and still give them and empower them to use in a safer way. If you're going to use, then is this an option of maybe using a different way, or maybe making sure that somebody's with you in case you OD, you know, just those different ways of making choice and being empowered, even if it's something that most people want you to quit doing, you know,
Yeah.
and some people, they do want to quit, but they just not able to in the moment, you know, like I know that even though I want to quit, that I'm not going to be able to do that today. And so how can, you know, then the conversation becomes, well, how can we keep you safe until you are able to quit? How can we give you some skills to maybe reduce how much you're using today, so that maybe tomorrow it'll be easier to quit a little bit easier because you're not using as much today. And so, you know, just coming from that perspective of non-judgment, you know, you know, and even coming to a program, so if somebody's forced to be here for courts, then, you know, you have the choice to leave. You don't have to be here. Even if courts are saying that you're forced to be here, I'm not saying that, because you are welcome to leave. You have consequences for that choice. There are, you know, I can't control what the courts are going to do if you leave the program, but I'm not going to tell you that you have to stay here, because that's your choice. You can always choose to not do what somebody wants you to do. And most often people stay. I don't think I've never had anybody walk out actually. But they recommit, you know, they when they have that option of, oh, I guess I can leave, but I really don't want to because I don't want to have to deal with courts later, then they are even more committed than they were 2 minutes ago, because now they're choosing. That
Right.
self-empowerment, it's super important.
Oh,
Agreed.
that's the whole idea, being able
Yeah.
to choose. And I really like your approaches. I think that's really helpful with people with anger issues. Obviously, if they are having addictions and abuse, drug abuse problems, it's going to be a lot more difficult to have uh, uh, um, manageable anger,
Mhm.
you know, because of the distorted thinking and just not being able to control themselves because of it. But on the other hand, yeah, helping them to keep going and are are is this the approach then that most addictions counselors are taking? You know, allow them to still come even when they're using, and hope that they can decrease, or hopefully you can motivate them over time.
Mhm.
Is that
No,
the
no, but there's about 90% of addiction counselors still believe in this, you know, not the moral model necessarily, but you know, that disease model of, if you're using, then you're out of control. If you're using, then you can't control any use at all. You know, harm reduction doesn't work, kind of thing. So no, it's a smaller population of us, but
Mhm.
I definitely think that there's a shift. The shift is happening to where we're recognizing that, just like depression, just like anxiety, we can't expect people to just be cured of depression tomorrow, right? We can't expect that people are going to be able to shift all of the factors that lead to depression. We're not going to be able to expect that to happen tomorrow. And, you know, and it's heartbreaking because there's some folks that, you know, they want to do some programming for meth, but they're still smoking marijuana, and they get denied to do outpatient programming because they're still smoking marijuana. So they
Oh,
have to do inpatient to get some help with their meth use because they're still smoking marijuana, which marijuana does not rise to a level of inpatient treatment alone by itself, you know what I'm saying?
mhm.
And so, you know, it's so heartbreaking. That was one of the situations I had where I really advocated for my client in that situation, because you know, they were denied into an intensive outpatient program because they still wanted to smoke marijuana. And it just, I get that, you know, mixing abstinent folk with people that are still using is risky in some ways, and it has its complications. But you know, how is that a disservice to our client that's asking for help and we're
Mhm.
denying them help? You know,
Right.
that doesn't feel ethical to me. So yeah, yeah, it's a new, and it's not new. I mean, it's been around for a long time, but
Yeah.
we're just stuck. We're stuck in that disease model, I think. So
Well, I think that it's important to consider options in our approaches.
yeah,
And if it's not going to work for some people, how can we prevent them from ODing?
right.
And
Yeah,
so that, yeah, uh,
yeah, agreed.
yeah. But I'm not an addictions counselor, and
Mhm.
I never wanted to be one. And so I always refer to people like you.
Yeah,
So I'm thankful for you. And I do have some addictions counselors around here, who are excellent. So yeah. But Victoria, um, hang on a second. One second.